תצווה בני ישראל, ויקרא לך שמן זית זך. Shemen Zayit Zach is talking about something that can be found in nature, something that grows out of the earth. And we humans have learned the intention behind the processes of nature until we can understand nature. We can understand from seeing what's happening outside of us, processes that are happening inside of us. And so oil is something that we squeeze out of the zayit, and then it allows for fire to continue its existence. Fire itself is, in a sense, an invention. It was there in potential, waiting for us. But it wasn't available unless we could figure out how to get it, how to bring it out from potential into manifestation. And so, therefore, this concept of fire represents the human ingenuity, the human capacity to be able to create life out of the elements of nature. Oil gives this power a continuance. So fire for itself is constantly eating. It's constantly eating away at the material world and removing its form. When it removes the form, it's returning it to its original source. The fire represents the force that comes into the physical and returns it to its spiritual formlessness so that it can take on a new form. This is the nature of matter. It's the nature of imagination. Matter is the collective imagination. And the nature of imagination is that it's always poshet tzura belovesh tzura. It cannot stay fixed. And this has to do with the process of how we imagine. The imagination itself is processing within the brain, but what allows it to come out into manifestation is the blood that's being pumped up to the brain. And so within the dam lives the dimayon. The dam is always moving, which means that the dimayon is always looking at a different lens. We're having one flawless experience, but internally it's not flawless at all. There are different parts and pieces that are being put together quickly before you can notice that this is not really one stream happening. There's a lot going on. So when we're looking through the blood, we see drawings and images. Drawings and images that we ourselves are creating, partially by what's already in the blood from before. And this is why the liver is such an important part of thinking. It's because the liver prepares the blood so that the brain can think in it when the heart pumps it up. So the liver, the heart, and the brain together are going to think. The liver is going to prepare for the imagination, chomer. The heart is going to decide the speed of the delivery and the quantity. And the moach is going to give a tzura to that chomer. Okay? This is the process of thinking. This process is similar to the process of fire. And this is why we constantly need to eat to replenish the blood so that we can continue to think. We're constantly burning energy as we're thinking. The organ that burns the most energy is the brain, because the brain is doing the thinking. The fire of the brain is eating away at the process that is being powered up by the liver. In order to sustain this life force, in order to extend and to give power to this life force, we can add oil. Oil is going to make this process burn much better, much nicer. The flame is going to depend on the purity of the oil. If the oil is pure, the flame is going to be very efficient. It's hardly going to take anything from the body to run it. And it's going to be beautiful. The one that's experiencing it is going to feel very light, very lofty. It's going to be able to invite very high level presence because of that condition, the condition of the fire that is burning in a very pure oil. And so throughout the Torah, the word shemen is used as a metaphor. Like when Shlomo HaMelech says, B'chol es yu begadecha levanim, v'shemen al rosh al yechsar. At all times should your clothing be white. White meaning that the tzura that you're drawing, the tzura that you're dressing your presence in, shouldn't be red, shouldn't be dressed in midas adin, shouldn't be in conflict with reality. So always have white clothing, meaning all your thoughts should lean towards the right. How do we make this situation better? How do we interpret what's happening? How do we interpret this event? How do we interpret this experience to mean the best thing that it can mean for the spirit? Because it already happened. The meaning I'm going to say. I'm going to decide the meaning. So what meaning can I give it that's going to be helpful to my situation, to what the spirit needs? That's the white clothing. Then, v'shemen al rosh al yechsar, there should be no lack of oil on your head. Oil is wisdom. Wisdom is what allows the fire of consciousness to burn more efficiently. The purer the wisdom, the more the flame is going to be pure. The flame is going to be felt as something pleasant. The presence that's going to be invited is going to be from a world that is kind and loving towards humanity. If there's a lack of oil, or if there's coarse oil, if there's the wrong kinds of oil, or if the tzura, the dress, is not white, then the result, the flame, the spirit, the presence, all contaminated. Because this is the nature of the flame. It's just like if we would light a flame in the wrong oil. We wouldn't expect it to somehow burn nicely just for us, just because we really want it to. There's a nature. The nature results in the experience. It is what it really is. And so the same way in the oil, in the wisdom, in the spiritual. The spiritual is the way that it really is. Unless a soul gets to the level of prophecy, which is the level where they can override certain laws, the spiritual laws are not negotiable, just like the physical laws are not negotiable. Just like we cannot expect a wall to move for us when we're in a rush, we can't expect our consciousness to be pure if within our experience is all kinds of conflict. This is just the nature of life. This is not personal. Nobody's out to get us. Nobody wants to hurt us. But whatever we're feeding the spirit, that's the presence that we are inviting. And that's the presence that's going to arrive. There's never a mistake. So when the Kohen Gadol wants to go in to do the service of bringing light to the higher realms, what does he do it with? How does he get that level of perception? Through Shemen Zayizach. Through very real and authentic purity. Purity in the sense that everything that's happening to the Kohen, everything that's happening to the priest is aware of it. The priest knows. The priest can bring back every situation and attach it back to the source where it came from. This was the avodah of the Kohanim. The Kohanim were not just in our service. The priests were everywhere. The spiritual representative of a nation was their priests. Today, the world has changed a bit in the sense that people became a lot more practical and a lot more intellectual. And so the leaders became rabbis or politicians or other forms of intellectuals. But in the ancient world, originally, all leadership was priestly leadership. All leadership was based on the spiritual advancement of the leader. There was no other way that anybody would trust anyone to lead them unless they were spiritually advanced. Otherwise, how do I know that you're not taking me into an eternal dungeon? And so only the spiritually advanced were in a position of leadership until the beginning of government. Kings. And even they were involved with the priestly class. Usually they were themselves priests or even high priests. Like the Pharaoh was usually the high priest of Egypt. And if they weren't themselves priests, then they were considered to be placed in charge of the people by the priests. Nobody else had any right, obviously, to do anything with the people. No sane person would go after any single directive that wouldn't come from an authoritative source. And authority could only come from the spiritual. That was the basic understanding of a primitive human being, because he wasn't so sophisticated that he could just follow anybody and believe any authority. He was very simple. He didn't understand why he should. Unless you speak for the spiritual, for the world that I cannot see, I see no reason why I need to listen to your directives. And so that was a basic understanding, and therefore there was a race for knowledge. Also the wise and also the wicked wanted to know the spiritual realms. There was a race constantly of who is going to be the more advanced spiritual leader. Is it going to be the white leader who is trying to help humanity, or the black leader who is using the spiritual powers for his own purposes? And not always was it so easy to tell who belongs to which side. And so Klal Yisrael, in order to protect us from the wrong type of leadership. We had rituals in place where even the high priest, if he wasn't authentic, if he wasn't real, if he wasn't the way that he was presenting himself, he wouldn't live through them. And this was as much a test and a proof to the people as it was a way to find forgiveness from beyond. Because it's this relationship between the priest and the people that created the potential for forgiveness. The priest, through his own realization, knew the reality of forgiveness, but the people did not know. The people only had forgiveness through the knowledge, the understanding, the spiritual level of the priest. This is why there was a priest class in the first place. It's because the average person was not mature enough, was not developed enough, was not aware enough to be able to handle his own spiritual needs. Klal Yisrael was meant to be Mamleches Kahanim V'Goy Kodesh. We weren't meant to have a priestly class. We were meant to be all priests. And when we were all priests, then who would do the service in the Beis HaMikdash? The oldest one in every family. There's no family of priests. Every family has its priest. Every family is going to designate one child that they are going to be only busy with the spirit. All the others are going to make sure that their physical needs are met so that they can be concerned only with the spirit. They don't have to do any form of work that might distract them from the spiritual. And so the Kahanim had to be always in the right mood. If they were doing service, they had to be in the right mood because they were the ones connecting the source, who is steady, who never changes, and the different events and circumstances that move the people around between all kinds of moods. So in order to keep stability in the relationship, the priest had to be in a specific state of mind in order to do his service. This is why they were not allowed to drink alcohol. They were not allowed to see dead people or be exposed to breathing in the particles that the dead person leaves behind. And this is all because they needed to be in a specific condition in order to do their task, in order to remind people that the spiritual forces have an interest in what's happening here. And the spiritual forces are not looking to harm us. The nature of the Beis HaMikdash, the nature of the priest, is to bring forgiveness. It's such a radical attempt to bring forgiveness that it was custom designed that everybody should be able to participate. So you don't need to have a certain amount of money to get forgiveness. You just need to show that you care enough, that you want to be part of this community, that you want to eventually get to a place where you are perfect enough that the divine wants to reside within you. That's all that was required. So as long as there's Beis HaMikdash, anything a person does, he comes to the Beis HaMikdash, he leaves a new man. This was the function of the priest. So the priest knows that you're always a new man. The simple man doesn't know that he's always a new man. So the simple man has a ritual, so he can come to the priest And the priest that can remind him that he's a new man. Because if he believes he's a new man, he's a new man. What does it mean he's a new man? He will no longer do wrong. That's all we want. That's all we were asking for in the first place. So if we tell him, oh, you can do whatever you want and nothing happens, he's going to continue doing wrong. So no, you can't do whatever you want. There's consequences. But if you don't want to do wrong anymore, we'll find you a way out. That was the idea of the Beis HaMikdash. Until it became a joke. Until people would bring their kabbalas wherever they want, with whoever they want. Hey, if I give you 10 shekel, can you give me a ritual? Just do everything exactly like they do there, and then I'll feel good. All set. Moving on. It worked there. Why wouldn't it work here? Let's try. And then it all lost its point. Then there was no longer forgiveness. Then there was no longer a connection between the spiritual and the physical. There was no longer a connection between the person that's busy constantly externally and the spirit that he's trying to serve. And so the avodah of the Kohen requires him to have Shemen Zayizach. It can't simply be anybody. If the Kohen doesn't understand the secrets of what he's doing, he's not doing anything. And eventually that's exactly what happened. Kahanim were doing services, but they didn't know what the services were. They didn't know what it's supposed to do. And so then the house was taken away. What services? Where services? And that's exactly what happened. Is we were so far from the essence of services, you take the house away. Do you see anybody looking to offer a sacrifice anywhere? Nobody cares. They don't realize that they're missing anything. Nobody's itching to do a ritual because our minds weren't there anymore in the first place. It was taken away because it was meaningless already. And only when it will become meaningful will we have it back. If we would want it, we would have it. We just don't want it. We could say in the davening all the time that we want Yerushalayim to be built, and we want, and show us b'nechumas Tzion, and all kinds of very emotional statements. And yet, if we don't know why we want it and what we want, then we don't really want it. And that's why it's not happening. We haven't invited that presence. If we would have invited that presence, we would have that presence. We would be sitting here basking in its glory. We invited a different presence. We invited a presence that's filled with doubt and confusion. It doesn't feel like there's a direct path to forgiveness. And so that's the presence we have. We have what we invite. We invite what we believe. And that becomes the physical process. That becomes the blood. That becomes the messenger between the liver, the heart, up to the brain, and that becomes perception. Today we have advantages over the past. The past knew things that we can't even imagine any longer. We've been living in our brains for so long, we've forgotten what it feels like to be in the rest of the body. But because we've been living in the brains for so long, we have a very developed brain. That could come in very handy. We have to learn how to repurpose our brains so that we can use it for something that's more suitable for our needs. Humanity's become also a lot more gentle, a lot more confused, a lot more uncertain. We've lost our confidence. It's a bad thing, but it's also a good thing. It's a bad thing because we need confidence in order to function. It's a good thing because we had the wrong kind of confidence. We had confidence with guns and with weapons. That's no confidence. People were being macho. People were trying to outdo each other. That's not confidence. That's not what we're talking about. And so if that's the confidence, better not to have confidence. Let's go back to our thinking boards. Redecide how we want to approach life before we build our confidence up again. And so there's a lot of things, there's a lot of advantages that we have that nobody had before. Wasn't available. This is part of the development. It's the reason why we got here in the first place. And so when we can combine what they knew with what we have, that's the recipe for the ultimate redemption. That's what we're looking forward to. And so when we're yearning for a better world, when we're yearning for Nechomas Tzion, we need to understand, to appreciate a little what's really possible on this planet, with this body, in our present form, so that we have the appropriate desire for it, the desire that's going to make it materialize, the desire that's going to invite that presence, because that presence heals us from all our wounds, physical, emotional, and spiritual. So may we merit that in our time, this presence, the presence humanity has been waiting for thousands of years, the presence that was already present right in the beginning, V'ruach Elohim merachefes al pnei hamayim, the divine spirit hovering above the waters, waiting to come in within a human body. May that presence fill all human bodies, and may it happen soon.